Hi, everybody. Well, we're live. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the third episode of Steve's conversation stream. And if you knew how long it took me to think of that name for this series, you would you would weep in your heart for me. Um, but I am joined by my guest this week, the one and only Dan Arel. Dan, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Thank you for having me on. I can't believe I think this is the first time we've actually done something together.
I think it is. Yeah, we've like been Twitter buddies and Facebook buddies all these years, and we haven't
Oh,
actually done anything on camera together. But yeah, so thank you for agreeing to come on. And
of course.
yeah, we are, and I see in the live chat our fellow outrage brigade member PZ Myers is joining us in the live chat as well. So there's a little reunion, but so before I want to talk. Obviously, we have a lot in common in terms of the atheist movement and the sort of disillusion that we have experienced with that. And which is weird because I didn't plan it this way, but that's kind of what I had Ina, the host of the Polite Conversations podcast, on last week, and we talked about that a lot because she's doing her Sam Harris miniseries now, and it's like now we have it's sort of like part two with you because we're going to talk about a lot of the same stuff but from different perspectives. So but before we get into any of that, uh what first of all, this is a charity fundraiser, as all of these are, and you have chosen the National Bailout Collective. So I want to the address is on the screen right now as people are watching. It's nationalbailout.org if you want to go find out more about the National Bailout Collective and donate to them. It's a really, really great cause. It is black led and black centered, and is dedicated to ending pretrial detention and ultimately ending mass incarceration in this country, which is a very, very great and much needed cause. So that's the charity that Dan has chosen to support for this. So if anybody has a few extra bucks and you want to throw some cash at a very worthy cause, go to nationalbailout.org and support the National Bailout Collective. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the election? Um, because like, I mean, and what
how
has happened since.
how long is this show?
Yeah, right. As long as long as you have, buddy.
It's so my general thoughts on the election are, first, like, it's fantastic that Trump has lost. That's
Yeah,
a very great step. Uh,
yeah,
I'm not thrilled that Biden is the candidate we used to do that.
right,
And it was a very, I mean, I don't like to say, I think I have a more unpopular opinion among the left. I don't think it was a close election.
right.
Uh, the margins were big. I mean, like 5 million something votes isn't a small number. So there was a
No,
lot that happened there. But I'm not, I'm not a huge fan of his. So to see the election kind of go to him isn't a great step forward for us, but having Trump out of office is a huge bonus, because
yeah,
what he represents and what he keeps ushering in for us is very damaging. And I have to say that carefully, because it's honestly, my life didn't change much under Trump. Uh,
right.
like, for me, I mean, honestly, he cut my taxes a little bit. Like, I got a little bit more back in my check. Now, he did threaten where I work. I work for a labor union, and he
Yeah,
did come after us, and there was some threat there. But again, that's something I can technically recover from. So I had no, straight cis white dude. I made up
yeah,
pretty well, but uh, I had to think beyond myself. It isn't about what Trump's doing to me. It's about what Trump's doing to others and the world. And so getting him out was priority one. Uh, and now we just have to make sure he gets out, and then switch to kind of, honestly, the most frustrating part is it's now switching to fighting for the same stuff we were fighting for under Trump, and just hoping that maybe we have a chance to make a little movement, or we at least have a little bit less resistance from the federal government on things we want to change.
yeah,
And hopefully we don't have to divert attention from a Black Lives Matter protest to back at the airports for, like, a Muslim travel ban
yeah,
and things like that, where we can more center our activism on things instead of changing them weekly. Because with Trump, it was a constant flood. It was never like, oh, we're working on this project and that's what we're going to be hammering him about and doing. It was, here, what's what we're going to know. Wait, what now? What's he doing now? Now he's doing
Exactly.
what? Oh my God. Okay. Well, how are we going to put effort there when we're all working on this? And then it becomes just there's burnout, there's just a lack of resources, there's a lack of money. So uh, I like, I liken the federal government to something that we're kind of always fighting, but we had a chance to sort of choose who's in charge of what we're fighting against. And
Right.
I'd rather fight Biden than I would Trump.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up because that is, I think that's a really good way to look at it, especially for people like, I know friends of mine who are a little further to the left than I am, and I mean people who are in my position too. Like there are a lot of people who are exactly as progressive as I am who are still, like, I mean, Biden wasn't my number one choice either, and but it's a matter of, I've heard it expressed as, who would you rather protest for the next 4 years? Would you rather it be Donald Trump with Republicans in power, or would you rather it be Joe Biden and the Democrats? And even though, and I'm a registered Democrat, I identify myself as a member of the Democratic Party, but like, I mean, it's an incredibly frustrating party. Like there's, I mean, incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Like so frustrating. And but it's like, and unfortunately there are only two major options in American politics, and they're clearly the preferable option of the two main options, but that doesn't mean that you can just, oh, the Democrats won, now we can sit back and relax, like it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. And I guess you wouldn't necessarily want it to work that way. Like I want people to be involved and to be active in the system. You don't want it to be like, oh, we elected our representatives, now go rule, and we'll check back
Right.
with you in 2 years.
Yep.
Like that's not how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. Well, freedom itself is a constant struggle,
Yeah.
and it should be. Like you can't. I don't care. Like, well, I didn't vote Green. I didn't support the Green candidate. I
Yeah.
liked Howie Hawkins a lot. He's got great ideas. But even if Howie Hawkins won, it wouldn't be, oh, good. Well, now we don't have to protest anymore, because it's not
Yeah.
the president per se that you're protesting. It's the system. And the president is just a part of that system. And Biden isn't going to undo, but neither would Howie Hawkins, or neither would Ralph Nader or Jill Steiner. All these people aren't going to just immediately snap their fingers and undo systemic change. They're not going to fix everything. So we're always going to be in the streets to a
Yeah.
degree. I mean, in my utopian world, I don't think there's a time where there's not something that you're ready to go into the streets for, because we're not all going to agree. We're all going to build, uh, I think it's been said, like, democracy is messy.
Yeah.
Uh, it is, and it will always be, no matter what version or kind of democracy we have, it will always be messy. But that's a good thing. That's involvement. That's us taking part in the system. And it is frustrating to hear, like you said, like it doesn't end. But how many people have you heard kind of be ready to have it be over? Like I saw a journalist put, finally, no more fact checking.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute.
You should still do that though.
You should probably still want to do your fact checking.
Yeah.
But I remember being aggravated during the early protests around Trump, where people would be marching with signs that said, like, if Hillary had won, I'd be at brunch right now. And I'd be like, that is
Yeah.
the wrong attitude. Like, I understand what they're trying to say,
Yeah.
but like, if that person's serious, or those people that are serious, and there are people out there who will be like, oh, we're good, Democrats are in charge, is that the things that Trump has put in place, or the worst part about it is some of those predate him, and they predate Obama,
For
and
sure.
they keep going back, and that they're not done just because Trump's out. And so we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of work to do to undo the things that Trump has done as well.
That's the thing, I think, that is, I was very, very happy about the election result. I was relieved. Um, but yeah, I was relieved because, like, now it feels like, not that we can take our hands off the wheel, because we can't and we shouldn't, but it feels like, at least, well, if you need to take your eyes off the road for 5 seconds, like you might be, you know what I mean? Like you'll be okay. Like I really didn't like, and Biden's campaign said this a little bit. I said this frequently actually during the run up to the election, saying, wouldn't it be nice? Won't it be nice to have a president that you don't have to think about? And it's like, I understand the sentiment, because Trump was so exhausting. I mean, God, the Muslim ban was his first week in office. You know, the border crisis and, you know, family separation. That was almost 2 years ago. Like there's so much, the banning trans people from the military. Like you could if you listed every single like outrageous, obscene thing that he did or tried to do, like if you list all the atrocities or attempted atrocities of this administration over the last 4 years, like you, there would always be one you were missing. Like there's so much,
Hmm.
and it's so bad that it's tempting to say, "Oh, we got rid of him. Now we can relax." And it's like, no, we can't relax. We just have to go back to the level of vigilance that we had, you know, 4 years ago, where
Yeah.
there are still massive problems. Like, you know, you were saying before there, I mean, God, you know, uh, systemic racism in policing didn't just appear 4 years ago. I mean, it's been a
Right. Like,
problem for decades.
and I think the fact that this 4 years has felt so long that
Yeah.
people actually forget that like Black Lives Matter protests started under Obama.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
they don't actually feel that way anymore. It's been such a long 4 years. There's been so much that's happening, but yeah, these problems go back. And what we do have is what we can look forward to, and like you're kind of like hands off the wheel for a minute, is there are things like the Muslim ban.
Yeah.
That's something that on day one, Biden can just check off a list and be done with.
Yes.
There are these things that we aren't going to have to go back into the streets for. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to be less busy, but it means that we can kind of check these things off the list of like, okay, well, we don't have to worry about this thing. We know this can be fixed. We know this can be fixed, and that we know he will.
Yeah.
Uh, and then we
And
focus
and
on what.
there. Well, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say we just have to focus on the stuff we know he won't. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think also things that he is sort of facing in the right direction on, but just needs to be pushed a little further, like with climate change. Like he's not his like Biden's climate change plan is not nearly as extensive and as ambitious as I think it should be or needs to be,
mhm.
but at least he is facing in the right direction. At least he acknowledges that it exists, that it's a problem, that we should rejoin the Paris Accords, that we should, you know, that he's if you ask him a question about climate change, he's not going to immediately pivot to I want clean air and clean water, like Trump said, as though that has anything to do with climate change at all. You know, so it's like we do still have to push him and his people, and you know, and his more, you know, establishment Democratic allies in Congress as well, like Nancy Pelosi and her and people who are sort of her, you know, position. Like they need to be pushed and say, no, you're facing the right direction, but you need to do a lot more. Like this is not good enough. Um, but I would much rather have to do that than have to deal with like literal fascists and white nationalists working in the White
Right, and
House. Like
there's an argument. I don't know that we're ever going to push Biden anywhere,
maybe not.
but that doesn't mean that we can't push change locally, and that we
Yeah.
can't push Congress people. Like when you have an AOC or Ilhan Omar in there, those are people that can start to push change, and they go up the ladder. And it may not be with Biden that it changes, but we need to be working locally. I'm not a big fan of presidents in general, but I'm
Right.
a big fan of voting for city council members and for local lawmakers and state lawmakers who can enact that change. Look, we might not ever get Biden to ban fracking nationwide, but we can get California to ban it. We can get
Yeah.
Washington to ban it. We can get, you start listing states you can get to ban it where you don't need them to ban it. When you make
Yeah.
it so unpopular in a state that it's banned on its own. And so to me, I don't want to put too much resource into, okay, now it's time to move Biden. And now it's just time to move anybody we can move that can make an impact. And
Yeah.
maybe Biden gets there when he realizes the writing's on the wall. We saw this with same-sex marriage. How many politicians were, no, no, suddenly, oh, I'm going to lose an election if I don't say yes, yes.
Yeah.
Do you really move them? No, but you've moved the national narrative so far, they have no choice but to just kind of go along with it. I think that's like when I look at climate change, that's where we are. Let's make that change local, and let's make it such an unpopular stance that whether he changes or not, the next person that comes through to replace him has to take that position or they can't win an election.
Yeah. And you see something similar happening with healthcare. I mean, the Democratic Party has not fully embraced Medicare for all or something like that, some kind of genuine
Right.
universal healthcare platform. But it's become a much more mainstream talking point within the party and just within the popular culture in the last several years than it had been before. I don't think it's seen as nearly as extreme a position as it used to be. And really, it never should have been in the first place because we're so far behind the rest of the world in terms of
Right.
healthcare. But it's become more and more normalized and more mainstream. And it's not because, like national politicians were persuaded. It was the other way around. It was people, I mean, it was members of Congress, like AOC talking about it, but it was also just the fact that more people started to talk about it and say, hey, why don't we have this? Why aren't we pushing for this? Why is it, why are we settling? We're defending Obamacare in court because it's what we have, but why are we settling for that? Like, why are we, yeah, the Supreme Court didn't strike down the Affordable Care Act. Great. Why aren't we working on replacing it with something better? Instead of
Right.
celebrating the fact that we didn't lose the minimally, okay program that we have that we should not be settling for. Uh, and I think that's really encouraging that there is sort of this bottom up, change in certain things that
Yeah. And
hopefully the Democrats will catch on to before sooner or later.
there's far too much, and I can't say this is like this. I'm only speaking from what I can see, obviously,
Yeah.
but there seems to be a lot of thought that like everything comes top down to us.
Yeah.
That we seek this authority that lets us have. And you said it best right there when you just said like it's from like the ground up, it's the bottom up. Where we have to build that power from below
Mhm.
because the government itself has no power. We
Right.
have all of the power. They have authority because we grant it to them. And we tend to lose sight of that. And we sort of imagine that they have power and authority. And then we're just like, please, can I have this? And we wait for someone to say eventually yes. And
Right.
I once at a labor conference used this analogy, which came to me off the top of my head and it made me laugh. And I stood up and I opened up with this line and everyone's like, what, where is this going? But think of the movie A Bug's Life. And if you've seen it, you know where it's going. Like the changing point in that movie was when the ants realized they had the power.
Right.
And I wish I could remember the name of the grasshopper that was the one that actually said it out loud, but he said they outnumber us like 100 to 1 or 1,000,000 to 1. If they ever realize that, we're doomed. Like our politicians know this. They know if we ever collectively realize that we can take all of that away from them, they're doomed.
Yeah.
And so I think the faster we realize that, the more change we're going to get. That's why you keep hearing things about national strikes and what can we do to literally put the government at an odds where they have no choice but to listen to our demands because this is our country, for better or worse. This is
Mhm.
our like and they are only here because we've let them be.
Right.
And that's where we're going to enact real change. And we just got to find whatever is that spark is that gets us all going and unified in that message,
Yeah.
instead of a few of us saying like we can do this and then everyone else going, sure, let's get it on the ballot and let's hope that they say yes to this. Like, let's not give them an option.
Right. Exactly. I don't know, Dan. I just wish you weren't such an extremist.
You know me. It's that
Okay.
it's that bottom up extremism.
I mean, I'm trying to, I want to segue into talking about the atheist movement. And I feel like that's as good of a connection point as possible because like you are one of those people and to a lesser extent, I guess I am too among in certain circles. And when I was talking to Ina last week, she's the same way. Like, uh, certain people talk about you like you're the antichrist, like you're just one of the worst people in the world, like you're nasty and mean and extremist and violent, and there's just no talking to you about anything, and you're uncompromising and just awful. And it's like I've always gotten along with you. I've always found you super easy to get along with. Um, and it's like it, yet for some reason among, it's mostly like people in the atheist movement who are sort of, you know, the popular kids, or the people who are not necessarily like the most high profile figures, but the ones who like kind of want to be able to sit at their table,
Hmm.
like the podcasters or the bloggers or the YouTubers who are like, they're not necessarily as famous as Richard Dawkins or Krauss or whoever, but they like being invited on stage with them every once in a while, and they like being able to have them as guests on their show every once in a while. And so, if someone like you says, "Oh, like why are we still inviting Lawrence Krauss to events when there's just this article, in BuzzFeed News about what a sex pest he is and how he may have raped somebody, and how he like there's like this whisper network of everybody knows what a shit he is. Why are we pretending like this doesn't matter?" And it's like somehow you're the bad guy, or like why are we still treating Richard Dawkins like the Pope of atheism when everything he says is awful, and every time he opens his mouth about Muslims, it's like the most embarrassing, awful shit. And somehow you're the bad guy. You're the extremist when really there's nothing remotely, or at least there shouldn't be anything remotely extreme about
No,
about what you're saying.
I mean, it's funny because I'm pegged often as like, endorsing violence.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, the Nazi
or
punching thing was
the
another big
Nazi
thing.
punching thing really
Yeah,
came up. And what's hard is that, and I mean, we can touch on this a little bit, but
yeah,
I'm working on a book project,
yeah.
and I'm re-listening to some of those interviews and rereading some of the articles about me and about that time. Not necessarily all about me, but just in general, that time frame. And it's such a weird thing to look at. What, 4 years later now? It's
Hmm.
or almost 4 years. So we're coming up on 4 years since that all kind of went down. The ever famous Richard Spencer punch was on January 20th,
That's right.
4 years ago.
That's right.
And nothing that I was accused of ever panned out, which is what kind of makes me laugh when I'm listening to it. Like, now we're going to have anti-fascists causing violence in the streets, where to this date, anti-fascists have never had their own rally.
No.
They've never scheduled something on their own and said we're having anti-fascist. They've only shown up to others. The violence at them is actually few and far between. Most of the protests that happen really don't end up becoming violent. There isn't a Richard Spencer incident, or there
Mm-mm.
isn't a clash. Now, the clashes have happened. In Portland, there was a recent battle between the left and the right.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those are smaller. But also, what does the right expect when they show up dressed like the military, carrying weapons and
Yeah.
carrying shields? Uh, and one of the things I talked about so much back in those days was this was self-defense from the anti-fascists, or from the left in general. Like, they were showing up to defend communities. Uh, and really what it was, the accusations were that I was creating some boogeyman, that there wasn't this mass white supremacist movement, that there weren't Nazis in the streets, that Nazis didn't exist. And then over the course of 4 years, I think we really saw that change dramatically. And to some credit, a few, none of the big names really, but a few people have come back and said, how did it feel to be right?
Yeah.
And to which I said, I would have rather been wrong. I would have loved to have been told, look, there was no Nazi movement. It never came to be. There weren't white supremacists marching in the streets almost every week. I would have been like, awesome. That's something I'm happy to be wrong about. But unfortunately, I wasn't. Like, they were. And communities were kept safe because of it. Communities were defended. And in a lot of places, these people were run out of town. Richard
Yeah.
Spencer can't book himself at a college to save his life now. Milo can't book himself anywhere. Like, it isn't that we just ran around deplatforming anybody we disagreed with. Like, you'd be hard pressed to explain to me why deplatforming Richard Spencer or Milo Yiannopoulos was a bad thing. There is a net good to them not being able to book a stage.
Absolutely.
And so there's nothing extremist about that. Um, I think at the time, Nazi punching became this this meme almost, where it was like, oh, run around punching everybody. I did one interview with Lalo de Gotch. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, I know who you
We've been
mean.
so blocked from each other from so long that I haven't even heard his name in a while. But like,
Me neither.
he tried to end his podcast interview with me being like listing people that, would you punch this person? Would you punch? And he was like, would you punch a disabled Nazi? Would you punch a
Oh,
woman Nazi? Would you? And I'm like, we're now no longer on the conversation about trying to stop the rise of Nazism. That you're just trying to make it about the violent act.
yeah.
And what we did see is that transform over the years. So as that didn't pan out, it became, oh, well, you support Black Lives Matter. And look, I think Black Lives Matter, but I can't stand the violence. When the violence
Yeah.
is a broken window at a Starbucks.
Exactly.
And
And the violence that they're actually out there protesting in the first place is so much worse.
Right. Or
Yeah.
they're saying you're damaging buildings while tear gas is being thrown
Yeah.
at protesters by the police. And then so it became extreme. And so honestly, they just kept kind of grabbing onto something else that was extreme. It's extreme that I want to abolish the police. It's extreme that I don't think we should have. And so number one, they just dilute the word extreme. Extreme to them means something they don't want to take 5 minutes to think about and figure out, could that work? Look, abolishing the police is an extreme idea if you've given no thought to it.
Right.
If you've never heard of this idea of no police, and I said, we should get rid of the police, you'd be like, that is wild. Like,
what?
It's hard to imagine a world like that. But if you say, and that's what makes things like abolish and defund a hard slogan per se. Like, I don't like getting into that. Like, I think defund the police is a fine slogan, and so is abolish. But if you're not willing to have conversations that follow them or to learn more about it, all you're stuck with is they just want to get rid of cops tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
We could spend 4 hours talking about what abolishing the police looks like, but they just latch on to, that's too extreme for me. You're an extremist. And what they drop from the conversation is the world that I would love to see, my utopian universe, like the world that we could live in, is the least extreme, the least violent thing that you could imagine. That's literally what I'm aiming for. And they don't want to have that part of the conversation, because they just want to say, no, you're an extremist and you're violent because you don't want to have police there. And to get to your goal, you're okay with a building burning down. And I've had to say millions of times, if it takes 100 targets burning to the ground for not another Black person to be murdered by a cop, then goodbye 100 targets.
Yeah.
The lives are worth more than those buildings will ever be. And I can't, but to too many people, that's an extreme view. And I'll let you kind of jump in, because I can keep talking.
No, I think it's great. But I mean, it does say a lot, and I agree with you. I've thought this for a long time, that it really tells you a lot about a person and where their priorities are, if you notice who they're sympathizing with. And if it's because like a lot of the sort of more mainstream atheist figures that jumped on our asses about the Nazi punching thing were not really outspoken about other forms of violence before that. Unless it was Muslims, unless it was like Muslim extremists. Oh, they're bad. We need to worry about them. And people who want to punch Nazis, or not even that. Because I don't think I ever actually said, hey, we should all go out and punch Nazis. What I said was, if something bad happens to a Nazi, I don't care. And I don't care. I think at one point I said, I mean, if somebody ran over Richard Spencer with a lawnmower, I wouldn't give a shit. Fuck him. I'm not going to waste an ounce of sympathy on him. He's a Nazi. To hell with him. And, if the guy who runs him over with a lawnmower gets out of jail and wants me to buy him a beer, I'd be happy to buy him a beer. Why would I be upset by this? And why am I expected to be, oh, you can't, you're abandoning the moral high ground if you acknowledge that maybe it's kind of funny if somebody beats the shit out of a Nazi, or that it's a good thing that Nazis maybe we get to the point where people are afraid to openly identify themselves as Nazis in public because they're afraid that somebody will jump their shit. Like, I don't see the downside to that unless you're a Nazi.
Right.
Uh,
And
you know,
the funny thing is, if you're dealing with the moral high ground, you always have the moral high ground over a Nazi if you're not a Nazi.
yes. Well, it's
I
like
mean,
one of
factual
the
position.
I mean, it's not that. Yeah, I remember, and again, this is all like you're talking about the show you were on where he was like, would you punch this Nazi? Would you punch this Nazi? Would you punch a disabled Nazi? I think one of the last conversations I ever had with Matt Dillahunty was because he was one of the people that I fell out with over the Nazi punching thing, and I said something like, I if the guy who lives across the street from me is a Nazi and his house is on fire, I hope somebody else calls the fire department because it's not going to be me. Something like that. Just to sort of to put across the fact that like I literally don't care if misfortune befalls a white supremacist. I do not care. I'm not going to help you. And Matt was like, "You'd let him die? You let him burn up in his house?" And I was like, "He's a Nazi." Like, what is yes, to hell with that Nazi. But it's like the suggestion. It's like it's just and maybe some of it's performative, and maybe some of it like they genuinely
Right.
believe it. But it's like how could you say that? That's awful. Like that's terrible. That's a human being. Like yeah, it's a human being who is a Nazi. Like who
They
supports genocide and an ethno state and all these other horrible things, like
well, what came from it too was that they a lot of people that were really loud against all of this came down to like, well, you're going to accuse everybody of being a Nazi.
right.
And then, so number one, that never really panned out. Like,
No.
of course, I could go on Twitter and find a million people saying you Nazi, but like, that's way different than being publicly ostracized and having your speeches shut down, and having like groups, actively working against you. Never worked out quite how they said, and it's
Yeah.
because they couldn't grasp that the left or people in the anti-fascist movement or all of it were very principled. It
Yeah.
isn't a witch. It isn't a witch hunt. It isn't a hunt to find every single person that we can just accuse of being a far right extremist or a Nazi or a white supremacist, whatever label you want to throw on it. It was about actually protecting people out there from the actual threats.
Yeah.
It does me no good to call Richard Dawkins a Nazi and then get him deplatformed when what the problem isn't that Richard Dawkins isn't a Nazi.
No.
He is racist, but is he a white supremacist? I don't think I'd even go that far. I think he doesn't know where he is. He's his dating is antiquated, and he doesn't he doesn't evolve his thinking.
Take that, Dawkins.
But what the problem is that he's problematic for his own reasons, not because he's a Nazi. And I know of no attempt of people trying to deplatform Richard Dawkins. I'm sure he can probably get a speaking gig tomorrow if he wanted one. I don't know that COVID aside, but like he still has an organization that is fairly well respected through CFI now. Like, it's not like this is Sam Harris is in the same boat. Like the guy that called the Charlottesville Nazis peaceful. He doesn't really get labeled a Nazi. He gets labeled far right, which drives him crazy. But that, again, that's a subjective sort of analysis. I'm looking at his politics and thinking these are far right sounding. Again, he has a very successful podcast. He can get speaking gigs all he wants because they became objects of ridicule or criticism, but they didn't become targets of this like Nazi hunt that people seem to think was going to be the case here. But the groups that I say we just because I am an anti-fascist. You're honestly, and different conversation, but you're not going to catch me in like these big street protests. That's not my role in what I do. But Uh, the anti-fascists that are out there are focused on patriot prayer. They're focused on American, identity. Like they're focused on the 3%ers. They're focused on the groups that are actually out trying to cause physical harm
Yeah.
and have an end goal of actually causing eradication.
Right.
Those are the big problems. The Harris, the Dawkins, all they play their own role, and they contribute a lot to the problem, but they're not like anti-fascists aren't in front of Richard Dawkins' house. They're not in front of Sam Harris's house, and they're not at their events trying to shut them down, because that's not the immediate threat, and that's what gets lost through the whole thing, and what we sort of proved wrong how we proved them wrong in the end. Like, think about how we sort of got this outrage brigade thing
Right.
from someone who actually didn't speak at an event because it was so outrageous to speak at it.
Right. Right. I mean, to be fair, he had to be dragged away, but still, eventually,
He had to be dragged away, but the whole time being dragged away, being, I'm not being dragged away because of what they said.
exactly.
And the reasons I'm being dragged away are for these reasons. We're like, that's what we said. Like,
Whatever.
whatever. You're not doing it. That's a good. The net good was that you didn't do the event.
Right.
But at the same time, that event went on.
Yeah.
The next event went on, and I think they've sort of fizzled a bit since then.
Yeah.
But what came of that was that our mission, like together, like you, me, Christy,
Christy.
we didn't like sit down and say, all right, guys, here's our plan. We never even chatted privately about it. We all just saw this thing that we said, this is problematic, and we're going to shine light on it. And we did.
Yeah.
We made a very, and we asked people that we thought were more aligned with us, that might be unaware of the issue. And what was funny is that a lot of those people either pulled out or doubled down.
Uh-huh.
And but again, there wasn't some cancel culture to it. There wasn't we were just saying, we don't think people should go to this, and we don't think these sort of voices should give light to like a Carl Benjamin.
Yeah.
And look what happened.
You write about in your book. You write about the with Thomas Smith and Carl Benjamin.
And and Thomas, I like Thomas Smith. I have no problem with Thomas. I think we get along. There's some things we disagree about, I'm sure. I don't keep very close tabs on him, so I can't tell you that where we are like politically. But I do think he made a mistake, and I'll say that to him sitting in front of me. I don't.
Yeah.
I understand why he did what he did. He went to interview him, but he walked into a losing proposition. You're not going to sit down with Carl Benjamin and win a debate. Yeah. And it's not because you can't give better points, but number one, you're sitting in an audience that's there to see Carl Benjamin.
Yeah.
So first, you're already in a losing situation, because if you polled the audience after, everyone that loves Carl Benjamin is just going to put their hand up. Anyone there that likes Thomas Smith more is going to put their hand up. That's the way it goes. Yeah. If I go to a debate between Bill Nye and Ken Ham, wow, I forgot that guy's name.
Isn't it great that you can forget his name?
Wow. I am not walking into that debate thinking my mind's being changed. I'm walking into that debate to watch the debate, or honestly to watch Ken Ham kind of be made a fool of. That's what I'm watching. So you go into that in a losing proposition. And the fact that, once Thomas questioned him about the rape comment that he had made, and the place cheered, Thomas got rightfully angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think his reaction was wrong. I would have lost it and yelled at him no differently, maybe more so. But in the environment that you're setting yourself up in, you've now set yourself up for failure, unfortunately. Yeah. And that's what came out of that was, wow, you couldn't even have a civilized discussion with him, but he's not someone we should be having civilized discussions with. No. And that was the whole point. That's where this whole thing fell apart, was that we weren't trying to do anything other than shine light on a bad event. And if that hurt them financially, I've got no problem with that. If people canceled their tickets because they realized who Carl Benjamin was, great. If they couldn't sell tickets, had to shut it down, awesome. But the real goal that we all kind of set out with and individually was, I'm not going to let this happen quietly. I'm going to talk about how bad of an idea this is and the damage they're doing. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
And I think we shined quite a bit of light on it. And we got stickers.
Yeah, we did. Yes, I have mine somewhere around here.
I never got any.
Oh, you didn't get your Outrage Brigade sticker? Oh,
No.
I have two. I'll send you one. But yeah, well, it's because I remember us both talking to Thomas about it when he was preparing for it, and it was an example of the kind of mindset that I mean, I used to have it too, to a far lesser degree, but it was really pervasive, especially among atheists, because we all fancy ourselves as intellectuals and master debaters, and like, oh, we can just have a conversation, we can have a discussion, and we can convince people with our amazing logical arguments, and it took me a while to sort of realize that there are some people that's just always going to be a waste of time. There are some people who are so dogmatic, so ideologically rooted in their thinking, and are so extreme, and what they're saying is so harmful that it's just a waste of time. And in some cases, even worse than a waste of time. It could actually be dangerous to entertain them and to platform them and to say, like, oh, let's have a discussion about it. Like, there are certain things that we just shouldn't consider up for debate. If someone invites you to say, like, let's debate whether or not trans people deserve to have their basic human dignity acknowledged, no, I'm not going to debate that. Like, and I don't think you should debate it either. That shouldn't be up for debate.
And I'll say,
Yeah,
I wonder if I have not talked to Seth Andrews in years.
me neither.
But you almost quoted him.
Yeah, that's right. That's what on when you were a guest on his show. Yeah,
when I was a guest on his show, and I said I said black people should not, or the rights of black people to live is not a debatable topic. And he said, of course it's a debatable topic. Why wouldn't it be debatable? And that's the mindset that we're dealing with. Now I'll pause for a second and say, does Seth Andrews think black people should not exist? Of course he doesn't think that.
No, I don't
believe he thinks that. I don't think Seth Andrews is a bad person. I think he means well. I'll be careful there. I don't think he meant to say like that he thinks that black people don't have a right to exist. But once you say that nothing is off topic from debate, you open up a very scary world in which we find ourselves up on stage debating whether or not black people have a right to exist.
Right.
And that should never be something that is up to debate. There should never be a debate that takes place, even philosophically between friends, but with drinks and cigars. That is not something like the second you enter into that debate, you're racist.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's certain things that I'm just not going to discuss this with you. Exactly.
Right. And that's, I think you said earlier, like, the way people talk about me when they say like you can't change his mind or like you can't have these conversations. That's not the case. There's just some things are off topic.
Yeah.
Some things I'm not going to entertain. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, because when I was talking to Thomas about this, when he was preparing for the Sargon debate, like talking like privately about it, I was mad. And he and I aren't like best buddies or anything, but we know each other well enough to talk. And like, it was never about, you're a bad person, or if you do this, I'm never going to speak to you again. Or it was never, I really liked Thomas a lot. But it was just sort of like, this isn't going to go the way you think it is. This
Right.
isn't, you are not going to be able to accomplish what you think with this. And that's a mindset that is really difficult to get people to move past when you sort of when you grow accustomed to this. And on YouTube, it was, in the YouTube atheist circles, it was the whole scene for quite a few years. Like, it was always debate creationists, debate evangelicals. Everything was debate. And when you get used to approaching everything with that mind. Like it's almost like someone's speaking a foreign language to you when they say, "Don't debate this." You know, this isn't up. This shouldn't be up for debate.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think too, right, when you're debating creationists on Twitter or YouTube and all these places where you're kind of squaring up against people who aren't debaters.
Hmm.
Like back in the day when we would go on Twitter and find that person saying that the Earth was 6,000 years old, and then you just own them for 20 minutes on Twitter, and you come out being like, "Man, I am such a good debater,"
Right.
and then you square up against somebody who's equally as good as you on a topic that maybe you're not as comfortable in. You then realize that debate doesn't do what you think it does. It might make you feel great when you own that 12-year-old that has a Twitter account, but it doesn't translate, and it doesn't change minds. That those people that you debated and those people that watched didn't have their minds changed. I'll say one thing I was very wrong about was that early on people would be like, "Why are you debating these? Why are you wasting your time?" And I'd be like, it's not about that person, it's about the people watching. But in the end, what people watching? The
Right.
people watching either agreed with me or didn't. When they came into when if they read it, they already made up their mind. And depending on how they made up their mind, they were going to say, "Wow, he's making good points," or "Wow, he has no idea what he's talking about."
Yeah.
And like I said, the same thing happens with all debate. Your audience is where they started, and
Yeah.
so it's just not the right medium for this. And yeah, that's all I have to say about debate.
I want to throw it open for the last 10 minutes or so of the show to people who are with us in the live chat. If anybody has any questions for Dan about anything we've talked about or haven't talked about, go ahead and throw them in the live chat, and we can start taking questions from uh, from the people in our audience who have probably not changed their mind about too much. But um, I wanted to circle back to what I thought was a really good point that you made a few minutes ago about uh, the one of the reasons that the prophesied mass deplatforming or mass anti-fascist violence never happened was because anti-fascists are a lot more principled and a lot more focused than people who don't understand give them credit for. Um, and like I remember a few years ago the controversy among a lot of the same people that we've been talking about when the Southern Poverty Law Center labeled Majid Nawaz as an extremist, and then they received so much shit about it that they eventually took him off the list and apologized. But there was all of this outrage of like, oh my god, how could they do this? And it's like maybe, and it's arguable whether they made a mistake or not, because I don't know if you pay any attention to Majid Nawaz on Twitter lately, but he's been sharing a lot of pretty like conspiracy theory far right shit. So it's like maybe they apologized to him too soon. But you look at like the SPLC's hate watch files, and everybody's not in there. Like they have some pretty high standards as far as when they decide to label someone or something a hate group. It's not like they're just anybody
Right.
who says anything offensive gets thrown on the list. Like there is, you know, um, and they're not even. I don't even know if I would necessarily identify them with anti-fascists or the left. They're a civil rights organization that has been doing this work for years. Um, but yeah, that's kind of telling too, I guess, that they assume that people on the left uh, and anti-fascists are as unprincipled as the people that they're opposing. Um, Somebody said, I saw
Right.
a question.
It's
Yeah, go ahead.
because they've tied on like extremism to it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say really quick. It's because they look to far right extremism and then try to like marry those two together and think, oh, well, far right extremists are just nuts. They'll do whatever. Or they look at like you said earlier, like they had lots of problems with Islamic extremism or whatever word and that's one thing I'm terrible at, is what word to use when talking about that now. But it's they don't feel like it's principle, and so they can't imagine that anti-fascists or the left like really hold themselves to like an accountability standard, and that if someone breaks that, like they'll be pushed out of groups. Like if you're in a local leftist group and someone on there is pushing any sort of extreme or anti-Semitic things, you're not going to be welcome back. Mm-hmm. Like there's a standard there, and that's missed among a lot of the criticism, or that anti-fascists work in the street is like 1% of what anti-fascists do. There's education, there's monitoring of where these hate people are living in the thing, and who are they having influence over, and all that's ever publicized is, oh, that one guy that one time that punched somebody,
right?
And so unfortunately, like the whole of anti-fascist work is ignored because our media attention span is too quick, and they don't care. They want that hot story, and they want the story about that one violent act, and they can't talk about everything else that's being done, or why did that violent act take place.
Yeah. Question from the chat. This is from some random geek who says, Dan, what is your political ideology, if you would label it? I am an anarcho-syndicalist.
Well, syndicalist pin right here.
Hey.
But no, I think this is as easy to define, only because I think the easiest label I give myself is anarchist. Mm-hmm. But I also think that I generally use the word communist a lot. So I love to say like anarcho-communist because I don't like the whole dogmatic, like you have to be a Marxist or you have to be this, and that like this way is the only way. I am a pretty far leftist who sees value in anarcho-communism, much like if you read the book The Conquest of Bread, like that's sort of something like, I only say that book because I was rereading it a bit last night, but it's that I think if you want to say what was my political ideology, it's that we all have self-determination, and we function as a society that relies on mutual aid, and we all take care of each other. And I mean, I could spend far too much time talking about it, but like if you want to label it anarcho-communism, and I would love if someone wants to have further discussion about what all that means and how I got there, I'd love to have those conversations, because it's a fun topic for me.
Yeah. You're way too thoughtful. You need to just label yourself and stick with it.
Honestly, like it's silly how much time I actually will spend thinking about things like that. Like, because I'll be like, wait, crap, am I a Marxist? Because I really agree with these things. And then I'm like, no, but don't agree with him there. And you have to break that mold of like, it's like you kind of said earlier, like, oh, I'm a Democrat. I agree with it, but they're a mess. The left is a mess too. And I can look back, I can read things from all different leftist theories and be like, oh, that's really great, or that's never going to work, or that's terrible. I can also dismiss leftist theories. I can dismiss Leninism. I can dismiss Stalinism, if you want to call it a leftist theory. But that doesn't mean I'm tossing out all of Marx's work, but it doesn't mean I'm thinking that Marx is some god that predicted everything and was right about everything. I think Marx got a lot of stuff right. His critiques of capitalism are fantastic, but does he give a perfect pathway forward? No. But we've seen other societies try. We've learned from mistakes. We can build. And so that's sort of where I am. So I'm a, leftist is the best thing I think I can come up with.
Well, I mean, you can kind of look at it analogous to scientific thought. There were a lot of things that Darwin got wrong, but we don't throw out all of Origin of Species, Yeah,
exactly. And I think the only thing I set myself up for is that I use words like anarchist and communist, which no one ever understands. And I'd spend more time explaining myself than actually talking about what I think.
There's another question in the chat, complete 180, complete change of subject, but I'm sure there are people who are curious. This is from Radical Bacon, who says, "Dear Dan, how do you maintain your beard?"
Oh yeah, this is it took a very long time, and I don't. It's crazy. It's not maintained at all. It needs a good trim, but you know, I started losing everything up here, and when I shaved it all and my beard, my wife said, "You look like a cop," and I said, "Oh God, that can't happen." So I grew a beard, and so there's no maintenance here. Once in a while, I trim it when it gets too long.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't really. I mean, yours is a lot fuller than mine is right now. All I ever do is I trim it back like every 2 weeks, and other than that, other than like washing it when I take a shower, that's literally all I do. I'm way too lazy to do any kind of actual
Yep.
beard maintenance. Okay, here's
Oh
let,
yeah, I feel like if I tried, I'd
yeah.
screw it up, and then I'd have to. Oh please.
Well, no. I think my internet connection is a little spotty, so I think we're a little bit behind each other. So if I sound like I'm talking over you, it's purely accidental.
Your video is totally frozen for me, but I can still
Yeah.
hear you, so I've just been going with that.
How fun. Yeah. But so here's a question from Matthew McNeely in the chat, and we'll make this the last question, and then we'll wrap up the show, because this is it is not an easy question to answer. But the question is, what's the best path to de-radicalize people, and can lay people help, or is that a job for experts?
That's a job for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the best answer I have is talking to the. There's a lot of talk about, and we talked about a little bit here about like deplatforming, not giving people a platform to spread their ideas, and that's a very macro, you know, way of looking at it. Uh, I don't have time on the grand scale to try to appease fascist thought or right wingers. But if I know one in my personal life, if I come in contact with somebody or learn that someone, and they might not be a complete far right radicalist, but they might hold on to a far right idea that I find bad, is I'll open up a conversation about it and talk to them about it and kind of explain why I think it's wrong and use that as an opportunity to make them question what they believe. Uh, is that always going to work? No. And if it doesn't, there's people that you need to cut out of your life because they're
Mhm.
not worth saving. But there are people that, you know, no one's born a racist. You're taught racism. You're taught these things.
Yeah.
So you can also be untaught them, or you can find the error in your ways. Now, does that mean that I'm going to de-radicalize somebody? No, but I might be able to plant that seed that furthers that, and then they think about it more. They have another discussion, and over time, that thought process erodes, and they kind of find, oh, like this horrible thing I believed is wrong. Uh, we talked about new atheism a little bit. I would have defended new atheism for hours not that many years ago.
Yeah.
But the right people showed me the path it was going down, and I paid attention and I looked, and then I said, wait, do these things align with what I think? And I don't want to say that was like a de-radicalization, because that's more of a, oh, those people over there are bad. But it's the same sort of concept where people that were close to me said, I know that you tried to frame this person's argument as not racist because X, Y, or Z, uh, but instead, here's why I think that that's the wrong thought. And there are people I trusted and people that I listened to and gave me pause in my thinking, to me, learning more about why they were confronting me about this. What was it about that? And turns out they were right.
Yeah. And changing your mind is not a bad thing. Like
No.
yeah, that's the only way to make progress. It's the only way to become a better person. I mean, I feel like a lot of people, I think that's difficult. It's difficult to admit that you're not done, that you still have a ways to go, but like if you're not open to that,
Mhm.
then you're kind of stuck being whatever the person is that you are right now. And and if it turns out you're kind of an asshole, then you're just sort of stuck with that, you know. Um but
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
no one wants to be wrong, but being wrong can lead to growth.
exactly. Well, my friend, I'm going to let you go. We're going to wrap the show up. I want to remind everybody watching to please check out the National Bailout Collective. Again, the address has been on the screen the whole time we've been talking, nationalbailout.org. It's a really, really great organization, a great cause. So if you are feeling generous, or you are able to feel to be generous, if you have a few extra bucks to spare, it's a wonderful cause to donate to, really super important. And it's also linked in the video description. And also linked in the description is Dan's website, danarel.com. And also, we haven't mentioned this yet, and I hope PZ's not too mad at me for not mentioning it yet, because PZ was in the live chat, but you just you restarted your Danthropology blog on Free Thought Blog, so congratulations on that.
I did. Thank you. Yes, please visit that. It's freethoughtblogs.com. I should know that, huh?
Yeah, you're fucking up already.
Man, I'm gonna get in trouble. I should. Yeah, God, I'm gonna get kicked off by the time I'm done this. Yeah, it is .com. Good. Those .orgs get thrown in there one time. freethoughtblogs.com/danthropology. Or I haven't updated my website yet, but I'll be linking to it from danarel.com very shortly. But yeah, I'm really, really excited to have the opportunity to bring that blog back to life. I stopped the blog in 2017 on the Pathos network, and sort of regretted it, but not regretted it. Never regretted leaving Pathos, but regretted stopping the blog. And now just seems like the right time for me personally to bring it back and be blogging. And I'm really grateful to PZ and everybody over at Free Thought Blogs that decided that they would give me a chance over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading it. Because I think it's a good fit for you. And I'm really glad that you're getting back into doing regular blogging, because you're definitely one of there have been so many people who I met through atheism that have since disappointed me. And you are definitely one of the ones who never has, at least not yet. You haven't fucked up too bad yet. But and I guess
Yeah,
and I haven't
give it time.
and I haven't fucked up too bad for you, for you to be like, oh, the hell with that guy. So that's good. We're sort of in a nice pocket here before we cancel each other. I like it. But so thank you. This was great. I'm so glad we did this, and so glad you were willing to join me for this.
Me too.
So thank you so much for being my guest. And Dan's links are in the video description, and the link to the National Bailout Collective is there. So everybody check that out. And thank you all so much for watching. And I will be back next week for another one of these. And until then, we'll see you later. Take care, everybody.